So this week I'm going to be talking about case studies, and I'm going to talk a little bit about case study 6. I'm going to talk a little bit about case study 8. But really what I'm talking about in our breakdown this week is I'm talking about doing case studies in general. We're running out of them. There's still a lot of points out there for you to pick up in terms of case studies. And so I want to make sure that you're getting the best grades that you're capable of, but I also want to make sure that you're getting out of them what I want you to get out of them. So I want you to imagine that you're trying to study, elephants or zebras, right? And so you're going to go to a park in Africa where zebras and elephants live in order to study them, okay? The case study is the park. The arguments are the animals that you want to study, right? In order to understand them, you have to see them in their natural environment where they live, okay? So a kind of textual case study, right, like the Ray Comfort, right, that's where you have an argument from beginning to end, a whole argument, right? Organizers, clarifiers, junk, confirmation, refutation, all of that stuff, okay? A historical context is another kind of case study that I'll give you. That's more like the Ellsberg case, right? Okay, that's where you have less of a kind of specific sort of argument that you're looking at and more like a field in which a number of competing arguments are advanced, defended, and supported. But always, 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 our emphasis is on the arguments that are taking place, right? An argument, remember, is a specific kind, a form of language use. Not all communication is argumentative, but all arguments are forms of communication. So we're focused on those. You're going to be able to pull and learn about things that are happening in the world, right? But always our focus is on the arguments. And that's giving some of you some trouble. And I do want to be honest. This is actually, I'm so sincere here. All right. I do not like giving bad grades to people who are clearly working hard. All right. And so when I see something in which I've got a really thick, detailed, often sometimes insightful summary of the case study, without any focus on arguments, that's going to get a bad grade, okay? Because that's not about argument. And I'm going to walk you through that through the rest of this lecture. So please just slow down and really focus on what we're after here. Always, there's a pattern to the questions that I ask. I'm always, in every single question, asking you something about arguments. I'm asking you about assumptions or shared assumptions. I'm asking you to describe something. I'm asking you to evaluate something. I'm asking you to engage or participate with something. But in every single question, it's always trying to get you to tell me something about the arguments that are going on here. And I think that there is this kind of historical approach to your education where a lot of times what you feel like the whole purpose of the assignment is just for you to prove to the teacher that you read it. Okay, and so a summary that starts at the beginning and goes all the way to the end shows your teacher you got all the way to the end. The more details you have in your summary, the more convincing you are that you were actually reading it and not just skimming it looking for some high points. Okay, that is, I think, the kind of historical sense of how this process is supposed to work. And that may fly, in high school. I think that's kind of A, student work in high school. It will certainly, I think, get you through your associates, through your 100s and 200 levels. But the whole idea of an upper level course, of a course that is grounded in theory, is that you got to go beyond that and start not just learning the theory, but learning to apply the theory. And so the most important piece of advice that I think that I can give you is really to check your feedback. And D2L is set up to tell me whether or not you're checking your feedback. It keeps track of all of the feedback. So if I tell you in case study 2 that you need to do something, and then I see you're still making that same mistake in case study 5 and case study 6, you're not really leaving me a whole lot of options in order to kind of get your attention and get you to start fixing the mistakes and paying attention. And if you're not checking your feedback, you're just going to notice that your grade is going down and down and down. It's going to be hard to figure out kind of why. But more than that, you should know that while there's a couple of exceptions, very rarely is all the feedback that you get going to be in this text box. I'm not saying that never happens. I'm saying it's very infrequently that it happens. You should always be seeing an attachment there, and that attachment is going to have much more detailed, sometimes even line by line feedback. I don't just tell you fix your APA. I show you exactly where your APA is wrong, and often I'll type out for you exactly how to fix it, all right? I'll tell you what rule you need to be applying. I'll often tell you where you need or how you can look that up, where to find it in your handout. But most importantly, it walks you through where and how to apply theory when you're talking about these arguments. Where to say, hey, this would have been a good place to use the word evidence. This would have been a good place to use the word clarifier. This would have been a place for you to talk about what kind of logic is being applied. Or, hey, since you're evaluating, right, you get that level of feedback. And so if you're processing the feedback each week, then it's telling you what you need to do for the next week to make your arguments better. In terms of making your analysis better, okay, the one thing that you all can do consistently, right, in almost every single question you're asked, the starting point for any analysis of argument is always by recognizing, acknowledging, identifying, pointing out the arguer's claim and at least one reason in support of that claim. If you haven't done that, if you haven't said, here's the author's claim and here's the support that they're giving for that claim, then you haven't even begun analyzing the argument. You're still summarizing. And the more precise, the more specific you can be, and when you articulate that claim, the better the rest of your analysis will be. Putting things into a format where they have a clear quantity and a clear quality. So what that means is that when you're asked to describe an argument or to evaluate an argument, that's never an opportunity. You don't start by saying, well, Comfort's argument is about, okay, Ellsberg was concerned with freedom of speech, right? No, it's never just a single sentence. In fact, it's always going to have that claim and then a because after it, okay? Ellsberg thought it was right to steal and release the Pentagon Papers because there was a greater wrong taking place, the Vietnam War. And he felt that although stealing was wrong and he was lying to his country and taking what he didn't have a right to take, he thought the American people's right to see it outweighed his obligation to his employers at the Rand Corporation, right? There you go. Here's what he believes. Here's his claim. Ellsberg would have argued he is justified in stealing the Pentagon Papers. This is the reason why, okay? That's the starting point for analysis, not the end point, not the goal. That's the start of any analysis. Here is the claim, and here is at least one of the reasons being offered in support of that claim. I strongly encourage you to avoid talking about arguments by saying things like, Comfort discussed, right? Or Heinlein discoursed on. I don't even really like saying. The word you're always looking for is arguing. And it's a small thing. It's a subtle thing. But when you say, Chomsky argues, as opposed to Chomsky says, that simple linguistic distinction shows me that you're thinking about arguments as distinctive acts, right? As speech communication, as speech acts that exist in their own kind of defined space, that they are distinct from merely saying there is also arguing. Now, when you're asked to describe, and I often ask you to describe, or when you're asked to evaluate, right? Okay, you can't evaluate an arguer's argument if you don't know what the claim is and what the reasons are, right? Now, when you identify a claim, put that claim in a clearly expressed quantity and quality, right? So not Comfort talked about Darwin's theory of evolution and why he thought it was wrong. No, Comfort advanced a claim. All Darwin's theory of evolution is a bad theory, right? It's got a clear quantity and it's got a clear quality. And what that does is it allows me to set up my analysis better. Okay, now that I have his claim established, what are his reasons? And when we talk about reasons, there's two places we start. It's either evidence, right? Or it's logic. It's either the evidence, the claims, the statements of fact, the reports of fact, or it is the reasoning based on those reports of fact that get us to the conclusion. So what are we looking at when we look at reasons? Are they evidence? And if they're evidence, what are some of the ways we can describe that evidence? Is it first person? Is it second person? Is it testimony? Is it expertise? Is it dogma, right? What kind of evidence are we looking at? Is it, okay, logic. Show me the logic. Explain to me how the facts as reported support the claim being made. See, if you don't know or you haven't clearly said what the claim is, then explaining how the logic gets to that claim or makes it more likely that you're going to say, okay, yeah, I believe that claim is true. Like if you don't know what the claim is, you can't describe the logic, right? Okay, and then all right, is it inductive or is it deductive? If it's inductive, okay, then we're looking at data and then we're drawing generalizations from that. Okay, is there a fallacy of argument? No. Whenever we go to talk about the strength of an argument, whether it's a good argument, whether it's a bad argument, all right, then we're looking for things like fallacies. Does the arguer commit a bunch of fallacies? Usually that's a sign of a bad argument. If they're making an argument that is mostly inductive, is there data of good quality? Do they have enough of that data to talk about the claim, to draw those conclusions? If it's an argument from an analogy, then the strength of an argument from an analogy depends on points of convergence. If you're like, this is an analogic argument, here are the two things that are analog, it is a strong argument because there are many points of convergence, right? That's what makes a strong analogic argument. If you're going to say that you think the evidence is credible, that's the conclusion that you came to. I want to know how you got to the conclusion that it was credible, because credible evidence means that you believe that the person giving that evidence was smart, that they were educated in that field, right? That if they were a witness, they actually had a good experience that they could relate back and communicate to you, that if they're an expert, that they are actually trained in that area, and that they're a good person of goodwill, objective, that they're known to tell the truth, right? Those two criteria are what you're looking for. If you can't point at either one of those, then you need to come back and explain exactly why you think it's credible. Okay, because you believed it already or because it confirms what you already thought was true, that doesn't make it credible. Case studies are places to apply theories of argument, all right? They're a place for you to use these words, all right? Summarizing, no, all right? When I say what I expect is that in every single question, 1 through 4, every case study, every week, I should be seeing you unpack at least some of the theory words from your textbook and from the lecture. Now, folks, this course, I understand for many of you, isn't just a course in argument, it's a crash course in writing at an upper level, okay? And I'll tell you, one of the things that separates good writers from poor writers is that poor writers are trying to learn to juggle and learn to ride a unicycle at the same time, all right? You cannot work on argumentation if you're not also prepared in terms of doing the case study. Read the case study thoroughly first, okay? It's important for you to know what the case study, to get it, all right? If you don't get it, good students do what's called background research. They don't go and read Wikipedia so they can cite Wikipedia. No, they assume that the stuff in Wikipedia is the stuff everybody already knows, okay? They look up terms in the dictionary. They Google historical events so they can get a sense of what's actually taking place and get a sense of the context. Good students do that. You might think that that's like, oh no, that's just adding more time. Well, go back to rule number 1. Give yourself time here, okay? But also remember that actually doing a little bit of background, like Wikipedia-ing Ray Comfort so you know who he is and what he believes in, and some of the controversies maybe around him, that's going to make your analysis go faster and be better, all right? In terms of upper level writing, you should assume that in most cases, you're expected to at least reference. In your informal writing, you should still be at least referencing your textbook, referencing your lecture, referencing something that you learned. And the more formal that writing, you should be expected to be citing those references in APA approximately once a paragraph. There are paragraphs where you won't need to cite, but as a rule of thumb, if you want to know, like, am I citing enough? 1 citation per paragraph is a good rule of thumb to follow for upper level college writing. You need to format your citations properly and you need to follow directions, okay? That's super duper important. Following directions, more than I think anything else, separates good writers from poor writers. All right, what does this look like? Okay, and more than anything else, I think when I've had people come into my office, I'll walk them through what I just walked you through in terms of talking about the case studies. I think a lot of you may have seen something that looks like that in terms of your feedback that you've gotten. And some of you might be saying, I still don't know what that freaking looks like, dude. What does this look like? This apply theory, this use theory words. Okay. I'm going to walk you through a basic format. And there's more than one good way to do this, but this is a nice, easy, step-by-step way to do exactly what I'm trying to get you to do in these. First, every time you go to do an argument, start with the claim and say something about the reasons, right? So if you're doing a case study on Ray Comfort, right? You're doing a case study on his critique of Darwin. You're going to start by saying Darwin claims that, okay, all Darwin's theory of evolution is a bad theory because there is insufficient evidence to support Darwin's claims. Bad inductive reasoning. Great. Okay, so now I have laid out, okay, here's his claim, here's at least his reasons, this is a summary. This is where we keep it short and simple. It doesn't need to be thick. It doesn't need to be super detailed. Quick and to the point. Couple of sentences, right? Now our process begins. Step 1, name one of the features or aspects of the argument. And folks, here, I would always encourage you to start with something you feel like you know, all right? You have 4 questions. You're going to do this 4 times. First one, second one, I'm always going to try and use at least one term that I feel like I know pretty well. Maybe on question 3, maybe on question 4, I'm going to try to use a term I don't know that I know very well. Hopefully, I'm going to try and use one of the new terms that I learned this week. And I'm going to do that because I'm hoping to get feedback that says, oh yeah, Jim, you're getting this right. Good job. Or, whoa, you need to go back and read this paragraph. You need to go read this page. You need to go here, think about it this way so that I can get a better understanding of the concepts. It doesn't matter, though, at this point, which concept you choose. It matters that you focus on a specific concept. Step 2, define that concept. You can go to your textbook, you can go to the lecture, and you can say, according to Jim, this is what a hypothetical syllogism is. According to the textbook, this is what a hypothetical syllogism is. Now, you should assume that you're going to have to at least reference that, right? In an informal paper, in a kind of informal sense, or if you're writing on the exam and it's closed note, right? To be able to do some kind of, I think according to the textbook or from what I've read or what I remember about the lecture, the more formal you're writing, expect to cite this, right? And this is how you do analysis, not just from, okay. Point 3, the third thing that you do. The third thing you do is show how the theory that you developed in point 2, show how that thing you defined in the abstract fits the case study or example that you're looking at, right? So if you're going to say all hypothetical syllogisms have an antecedent and a consequent, okay, here is Comfort's antecedent. Here is Comfort's consequent, right? You're pointing out the features that you identified in your definition. You are now showing me those features in the concrete example of the case study. Name your concept. Define that concept in the abstract. Then point out the specific features that meet that definition in the case study. That's how you line these up, right? And again, because you're making specific references to the work in the case study, this is a place where you're going to need to reference. It's going to be a place where you're typically going to need to also cite, right? You're being specific, you're quoting, you need to be citing. Remember, your goal in a case study is not to show me that you really thoroughly get Comfort. It's not to prove to me you know everything in the world about Ellsberg. It's always to show that you understand arguments, that you can talk about arguments like an expert. That's what majoring in something and minoring in something means. It means that you're becoming an expert in that area. This course won't make you an expert in argument. It will make you an expert in argument on your way to becoming an expert in communication. And experts use technical terms to describe, to evaluate, to engage with the subjects of their study.